And welcome to this week's video lesson. Today's topic is Under Threat from the Sea. So this is taken from Unit 4.6 in your book. That's page 60 and 61. Have a look at this picture. What conditions do you think caused this scene? Where did all this water come from? What damage would be done in a situation like this? Imagine you lived in one of these homes. What would it be like? Do you think a situation like this happens often? Well, this was caused by something called a storm surge. And today we're going to look at what a storm surge is and what conditions cause them. So your goals today: to understand what causes coastal flooding, to know what a storm surge is, to understand and be able to identify the factors that cause a storm surge, and to understand and be able to identify the factors that increase the damage done by a storm surge. So let's start 4.6, Under Threat from the Sea. So you studied last year about rivers and how they flood streets and homes. Well, the sea can also flood streets and homes. And here we're going to find out how. First of all, we can't control it. It's wonderful being surrounded by the sea. It means beaches and busy ports and water sports and sea views and fun. But every so often, the sea reminds us that we can't control it. So we're going to read about a storm surge that happened in December 2013. But first, what does the word surge mean? A surge is a sudden, powerful, forward or upward movement. So this movement we're talking about is of the seawater. So it's when the seawater gets pushed forward and upwards. So on the 5th and 6th of December 2013, the British coastline took a battering from the sea. Gale force winds pushed big waves towards the coast. In some places, seawater flooded over seawalls that had been built to keep it out. It swept along streets and into shops and homes. Britain's east coast got the worst of it. A high volume of water rolled down the North Sea in a storm surge. The waves lashed at the coast. Thousands of people were evacuated from their homes for safety. Hundreds of homes were flooded. Let's look at a little bit of the vocabulary for here. Took a battering. So the coastline took a battering from the sea. Lashed. The waves lashed at the coast. So, take a battering, what do you think it means? A, to be beaten badly. B, to be covered in flour and cooked. Or C, to be welcomed. The coastline took a battering from the sea. It was beaten badly. And in this context, lash. Does lash mean small hairs around the eye? To strike or hit? Or to gently rub? The waves lashed at the coast. They struck or they hit the coast. Okay, continuing. In Norfolk, erosion was the problem. The raging sea ate into soft cliffs, causing them to collapse. In the village of Hemsby, the cliff fell away below 7 homes. 3 of them slid into the water and were carried off like toys. On both days, the River Thames barrier was closed to protect London. But there was good news too. Coastal defences in many places held up well, protecting hundreds of thousands of properties. Without them, the damage wreaked by the sea would have been much greater. So the raging sea ate into the soft cliffs. Raging means A, gentle or still. B, having great force or violence. Or C, always changing? Here it means having great force or violence. Now it mentions the Thames barrier. So on the River Thames, they have this barrier. Now it's like a big gate that can open and close. It's usually left open, but when we have a situation like this, they close it so that the River Thames level will not rise within the city limits and flood London. So why did this happen? So 3 factors combined to create a storm that flooded the coast. The first one was air pressure. So we had low air pressure. That means the air is rising. And when the air rises, it pulls the sea up a little bit. It creates a bulge on the top of the sea. So this causes a higher sea level. Combined with that, we had high tides. So it was just a time when the tide was at the highest. So this also added to the water level. But the main factor was the strong winds. So as you studied before, strong winds mean big waves. So there were strong winds at this time, and they whipped up the waves and pushed them up onto the coast. So it was a combination of all 3 factors. We have low air pressure, high tides, and big waves caused by strong wind. So the storm surge at the east coast. So the east coast suffered the most, and this map shows why. So there was a system of low pressure passing across the north of Scotland, heading east. So as that area of low pressure is moving, it's pulling up the sea level with it. And number 2, the winds and high water level caused a storm surge, a big surge of water. It swept down the North Sea. The waves, whipped up by the wind, hammered the east coast. So number 3, the surge grew higher as it moved further south. This is where the North Sea gets narrower and more shallow. So the flood risk grew too. So we have all that energy in the water is now entering an area where it's narrower and shallower. So this will raise the sea level even higher. Then the surge headed north again, flooding the coasts of other European countries. So look at the yellow lines on the map along Britain's coast. They show where the rock is soft or quite soft, and this rock is easily eroded. So that's down around X. So several parts of the east coast are easily eroded, so they are at risk, and especially in a storm surge. You'll see an example in the next unit. So right now, it's your turn. So look at this photo. The waves are lashing the promenade. What's the main cause of these big waves? Well, first, what does this word promenade mean? That's probably a new word for you. A promenade is just a walking path along the coast. So we can see these big waves beating into the promenade in that photo. And question 2, look at all the photos. I'll show you them in a moment. The factors below played a part in what you see. You're going to explain how using full sentences. So let's answer question 1 first. What was the main cause of the big waves? So write your answer in your notebook. You've studied before about waves. What is the main cause of big waves? So the main cause of big waves is strong wind. So in photo D here, these big waves are caused by a very strong wind that had been blowing down the coast for a long time. And number 2, look at all the photos. Let's see them. So the factors below played a part in what we see here. So explain how writing full sentences. So first of all, A, there was low air pressure over the UK. And B, the high tides were at their highest on those days. So pause the video, Write down your answer in your own words, and then we'll compare. Okay, if you've finished, let's see. So first of all, the low pressure caused the air to rise, and rising air pulls the sea level up with it. And at high tide, the water level is at its highest. So question 1 and question 2, they show us the 3 factors that combine together: strong wind, low air pressure, and high tides. Question 3, there was a storm surge in the North Sea. What is a storm surge? And it did a great deal of damage on the coast around X. So photo B here was taken from the coast at X. See if you can give 2 reasons. Okay, first, a definition. A storm surge is an unusually high rise in seawater level during a storm that causes coastal flooding. It's caused when there is a low air pressure, high tides, and strong winds at the same time. So, it did a lot of damage around X. Give 2 reasons. I think I'm going to give you more than 2, but see if you have something similar. So parts of the east coast are composed of soft rock, which is eroded more easily by the stormy waters. So this soft rock gets eroded by these big waves, and unfortunately, some people's homes collapse down into the sea. Another reason is the sea gets narrower and shallower as you move south along the east coast. So this caused the surge to grow. Also, point X on the map has the longest fetch, creating the largest waves. And also down here, the land is low and flat. So when the sea level rose, it flooded in over that low flat land. So let's review the main points from today. First of all, a storm surge is an unusually high rise in seawater level during a storm that can cause coastal flooding. It's caused when the air pressure is low, the tide is high, and the wind is strong, all at the same time. Low air pressure draws the sea level upwards as the air rises. Strong winds, winds blowing for a long time, and winds blowing over a longer fetch will create the largest waves. And coastal areas with soft rock are more vulnerable to erosion. So that is the end of today's lesson. Thank you for your attention, and I hope to see you at school again very soon. Bye-bye.